We get
and go.
And my audio went mute. So let's start over again. You've been seeing my face talking, probably maybe thankful if you're on the left where my voice went, but I'm back now. Good evening, everybody. California Free Radio. I'm Mike Netter here with Scotty Piotr and Kurt English. And unless you've been living under a rock for the last 48 hours, or hanging out with Kamala Harris in a hotel room with a few bottles of wine, or maybe been taking a nap with Joe Biden, you're pretty aware of what's been happening on the national and California scene. And this show is going to be a bit of a celebration and to bring you up to date on what's going on. The American people have spoken, and they didn't speak quite the way that the left wanted them to speak. So it, of course, ticks off the left tremendously. But the reality is, as I told a reporter at the Chronicle last week, to quote George Bush or to quote someone against him, it's the economy, stupid. And the Americans voted, and many Californians voted on the logic of what needs to be done to reclaim our society back to quasi-normalcy. California isn't quite there yet, but we made some serious inroads last night. Before I turn it over to my co-host or let them start talking, let's give a little bit of statistics here if you haven't been paying attention. Donald Trump slaughtered Kamala Harris, and that's probably the best way to put it. Not only will his electoral votes exceed 300, 270 to win, he's also going to win the popular vote. And surprise, surprise, on the popular vote, that's got a lot to do with California putting him over the top. This hasn't been done, I believe, on both ends since about 1980. And if you haven't been paying attention, we've take back on the conservative side the Senate, where Kamala Harris herself has been the deciding vote for the last 4 years, allegedly. Now we have 53 seats. Is that correct, Kurt? Might be a little bit higher at this point.
52 with 3 pending. We should
52 with 3 pending.
Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada are still in play.
Are still pending. So we have 3 more to go, but we're already guaranteed a majority. And as the House jumbles about, it looks like we're going to get that magical trifecta. But before I go too deep tonight, a moment of and let's just go ahead and get it out of our system. Scott, your race for state assembly, you're a little bit behind, but we're going to talk a little bit about the election system tonight.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks so much for all those that did support me, helped me on the campaign. It was a good campaign. We knew it was an uphill battle from a long shot type of a race with the Connie Petrie Norris and the Democratic machine being up 12% on just the registration. So I ended up finishing less of a separation than the registration. I'm about 9.5. Now I've kind of lowered down to almost 10 points less. So I started out the evening at 21 points down. That was the reporting from just the absentees, because that's what happens. Absentees get delivered first, and whatever happens, it happens. By the end of the day, on the election day, I was down to 9.5. So we fought a race. We fought on the issues. She refused my debate offers, and we still had fun running the campaign, and we did get our points across. But it kind of brought to me some of the problems that the Republican Party has in general, which we can get into later.
Before we even get there, when Scott talks points, he's really only about 10,000 votes out right now, and there's probably another 60,000 to count. So everybody likes to talk in percentages. It's funny when you get to the presidential election, we talk in actual numbers, but the reality is there's a lot of races in California where not only are we going to pick things up, but California, and it amazes me, Scott and Kurt, by the way, that by the time I flipped back and forth to Scott to between Fox and CNN, yes, I watched CNN a little bit last night, really just for sport. Um, Florida had already finished their elections, right? They're already like, we're done. Trump won. Here's the results. Scott won. Have a nice day. And California will still be another 30 days out as the printing presses roll, as they say, manufacturing. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, counting ballots to make sure much of their side wins. So we're the biggest in the nation, the slowest in the nation, and allegedly the most automated. So Scotty still stands a chance, although if I was a betting man, I wouldn't put it on Trump like I did on the Trump thing last night. Not that I laid any money down, but there's a lot going, and we're going to go over those elections in the system. Kurt, weigh in on the national scene a little bit, and let me guess by the look of your T-shirt, you're pretty happy with the way it turned out.
Yes. Remember 1980 for all of you who are old enough? It's morning in America again. So my son and I were matching shirts since he was able to have a free dress day at school today. And everyone but one of his teachers was very supportive. I went to Whole Foods to buy some food for my mother, said hello to the clerk as I checked out at the cash register, refused to talk to me. But when I went to Stater Brothers, one of the clerks high-fived me, and others said, wow, that's even better than the Dodgers winning the World Series. The lady in front of me was all excited. Everybody was excited at Stater Brothers. So, basically we had a pretty good day. People were excited at the bank. People were excited everywhere that Trump won. And I think that people were very tired of the drive to castrate children, the drive to censor free speech, the bullying and the overreach of government. Over the weekend, you might have been familiar with what the thugs in the government did in New York State, where this guy in a rural area had a squirrel and a raccoon that he had trained, and they were his pets. And I'm not the biggest pet guy in the world, but if somebody wants to have pets, let them do it. Why is the government interfering? So they showed up guns blazing, held the guy in detention in his own home with his wife for 5 hours because he had these pets. They took the pets, claiming, oh, there must be some rabies risk. Well, everybody watching this who knows about animals knows that if an animal has rabies, it's obvious to everyone. You don't need a test because they're pretty angry and frothing at the mouth, and the behavior's pretty bad. So they executed this guy's two pets and never tested him for rabies. So it had nothing to do with following the law. It had everything to do with the bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. They wanted to intimidate this guy. They wanted to show him who's boss. And 12 of my relatives fought in the Revolutionary War 250 years ago. And that's how you get revolutions, when government treats people that way.
And was that your dad who fought in the Revolutionary War?
No, I think it was somebody your age, though, Mike. But
anyway, you didn't sit there and explain. You didn't really explain the squirrel incident.
They killed them. The government killed them.
What was the alleged reason for having that?
Was it some nebulous health concern?
Somebody had complained.
Somebody complained. How would he even know?
Hold on. I don't want the left to be upset today because the squirrel had a name. This wasn't a random squirrel. It was Peanut the squirrel, who was an Instagram star. And the story is, complained that this guy had a squirrel in his home, a wild squirrel. It had been a pet for 7 years. But you know what, Kurt? What I think had a bigger effect on the election and kind of got buried in the publicity, and I make fun of this quite often, and Lord, please don't strike me dead, is that I often say that everybody likes electricity except the Amish. And you know what happened in Pennsylvania, don't you, Kurt?
The Amish came out and voted in unusually large numbers for them.
And you know why they did?
Because the government went in and poured some guy's raw milk out in his farm.
Right. They raided the Amish And because apparently, and I'm not quite sure why the Amish were a health scare. Look at me. I'm obviously a health scare, and I'm sure they'll be raiding my house later tonight. But the reality is they fired up the Amish. And in a way, it didn't tilt Pennsylvania. And I don't know how many Amish people there are. I normally look things up. But again, when the government, and we talk about this in California, and Scott, you've talked a lot about it. You talked about this a lot in the year we've been doing, which is supposed to be the people's government, starts becoming the oppressive government. When the left takes what's a really bad idea and makes it a worse idea, and oppression takes place, it fires people up. And apparently, it's not just Kamala Harris. Well, maybe a lot it is. But the reality is the message was simply screw the right. That was kind of the campaign message, don't you guys think?
Well, it was stomp on the citizen. And the answer to your question is there's 92,000 Amish people in Pennsylvania.
Well, there you go. And
So
thank you, Kurt, for looking that up.
They,
I feel
they
much more
weren't they
educated.
weren't pasteurizing their milk, so they came and poured it out.
Yeah, there was raw milk. They just poured. They wouldn't let them have it. And if some guy wants to milk his cows and drink his milk, whose business is it to bother him? Leave him alone. I'm in
Well,
the
I'm a little bit
Republican caucus.
I'm a little bit confused anyway because I don't really go to a health food store. Look at me. But I've been in one from time to time, and they actually you can buy raw milk.
Unpasteurized milk is for
I mean,
sale.
you can buy it. So I guess the problem was, like any good communist government, they weren't selling the raw milk in the proper way where the government can make money off of it. And Kurt, I'm going to bet you that's really the crux of the problem with it.
Oh, I've had a problem like that with the government. We had a natural grass-fed beef company, and there's a division of the USDA uh, that is funded by the money they charge the producers and the fines they collect from the producers, and that's where they get the budget for their agency, which to me,
So if they need more money, they go
Yeah.
out and invest more
yeah,
people.
which is corrupt and a conflict of interest.
Well, let's rotate a little back to the historic part of last night, and we are California Free Radio, and rotate back a little bit to how historic it was. Now, Kurt, I was just kidding you, and you're kidding me. I don't date back to the Revolutionary War, but about 1894 and thereafter, which I do remember, Grover Cleveland Alexander was the only president to run, lose, and run again, and win. And nobody thought that would ever happen again in American history. Now, for everyone out there for this next cycle, and I want to get to the election results tonight, I want to give you a little bit of my opinion as to why Trump won, being helped by the leftist media. And I want you two co-hosts to guess what you think I'm going to talk about.
Okay, what?
Trump. They couldn't stop themselves from talking about Trump. Politics and Scotty.
Even when they're talking about Kamala, they kept saying Trump, 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 Trump.
For the last 4 years, I want everybody to really think about it because this is where, and it's kind of like the Amish, the squirrel, you can fill in a bunch of metaphors, and we'll get to that with the California election results. For those of you, and I don't do it often, but you do turn on the news, and whether it's Grover Cleveland Alexander, George Bush, Bill Clinton, Obama, does anybody remember any time in history where an ex-president, a president out of office, has been referred to so much? Now think about this. Every time you turn on Curtin Scott, the evening news, or almost any show, even I don't watch The View, but you get clippets of it, right? This was basically the show.
That's
My
because you
good
have too high an IQ, Mike, to watch The View.
Well, I probably have too low an IQ to operate the remote control that's stuck on Fox, but that's a story for another day. Think about it. You turn on the TV and here's what you hear. Well, an earthquake happened today in California. No one was hurt and nothing was damaged. And now, Trump, 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 Trump. We tried to get Trump off the ballot. We prosecuted Trump in Georgia. We've got him on trial in New York.
The earthquake
And
was
now
Trump's
here's-
fault.
Yes, and now here's the weather. Well, the weather's going to suck tomorrow, Jim. It's been hot. Now back to Trump, 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 Trump. Oh, by the way, what happened in the World Series? The Dodgers won. Glad we spent a minute on that, Sally. Back to Trump, 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 Trump. The leftist press, in my not so humble
I'm
opinion,
not sure I understand the point you're making, Mike.
the point I'm making is they kept talking about Trump. And Randy is exactly what helped keep Trump on everybody's mind. And when you think about it, the leftist press kept Trump in everybody's mind more than Biden. Because the reality is, he's a more historic figure, like the shirt that you're wearing. Biden isn't that interesting to cover or watch. You guys can come back at me, but it's kind of like,
Well, but the problem is Kamala Harris slept her way to power, had no talent, flunked the bar, was one of the dumbest people that ever ran for president. She couldn't even dare tell you what she was really for because it would scare the American people. So their only line of attack was to attack Trump rather than to tell the American people what they were for.
and that kind of caught up with him, don't you guys think? I think it's catching up in California politics as we get to it. But even when I watched the left political pundits last night, who again had to talk about Trump, they were saying, hey, I guess it kind of caught up with the fact that no, Camilla had no policy. She was basically like expletive deleted Trump. Have a nice day. And let's practice joy and happiness like it's a meditation session. And somebody goes, you're running for president. And then she also said, which I thought was very weird. I thought this was happening, even was happening, that she supported everything that Joe Biden did. What are Joe Biden's?
Total screw up when she said that on The View.
You say she screwed up?
Oh, yeah. Because who wants high inflation, high food prices, high gas prices, the Afghanistan withdrawal debacle, World War III, and an illegal alien invasion and a crime wave? Who wants that? Who wants?
So you think she just went into protect Biden mode and did that, not realizing the ramifications of what she was saying?
Right track, wrong track. You two guys have been in politics a long time. Mike's been selling products for decades. When the 70-something% of the people say the country's on the wrong track, that candidate doesn't win. The incumbent doesn't win.
Right. She could have distanced herself from Biden. She could have.
That was her only path to victory.
Yeah. And well, she would have had to actually have her own ideas, which she's not smart enough to have. I mean, face it, she's dumb as a post. And she showed it. And I think as the voters,
Hey, hold on. I got post listening right now. Let's not insult them.
it will be an insult to them. But I think everybody was all excited when she first substituted for Biden because they thought, oh man, we dodged a bullet. We're not going to have Biden on the ballot. He is such an idiot. And then they realize, oops. The more they see of Kamala, they realize we got the worst idiot, and she's not even dementia laden. Sorry, I mean that's
you're right. I'm laughing because Kurt's got an interesting point here, right? So why the press is quibbling about 4 points up here, 3 points here, margin of error of 1 point here, and this will be a good lead into California here. Something like 70% of the American public, when they say, hi, I'm calling from the local polling service. What do you think of Joe Biden? This is a very short conversation. Biden sucks. Have a nice day. And 70% of the people, Biden sucks by any measure. It wasn't even 1 or 2 points. You would think, Kurt, that's a very good point, that they would have caught on the fact that's a pretty big margin of error, 70 to 30. And I'm sure the other 30 were lying, to your point. But let's just put that down, or they made it up. Thought Biden sucked. Why would you attach yourself to Joe Biden?
Well, and Kamala Harris lied about him obviously having dementia and being incapable of being president.
I'm going to go back to Kurt. Camilla's so dumb. I don't think she knows how to spell dementia, which I probably don't either. No less recognize dementia. So I don't even know how often she really saw Joe Biden. We, the American people, don't see. And by the way, that's a great question for everybody. Did you see Joe Biden's statement on the election today,
No, I did not.
Scotty?
Nope.
Yeah, neither did I. Isn't it fascinating that the actual president, allegedly, of the United States, almost
Allegedly.
48 hours later, 24 after the California polls closed, has had.
Well, I think it may be because he's not functioning anymore, which is very scary. Like Woodrow Wilson at the end of his term, his wife was running things like Jill Biden is today because he was
Another Democrat hiding his health from the public.
I'm getting very suspicious of Kurt's actual age because he throws out like Revolutionary War, Woodrow Wilson, like, remember, guys?
Those who don't remember history are damned to repeat it.
Okay.
No, I understand that. But Kurt, it's almost like you remember it, not having read it, but having lived it. And I'll stop there.
So your truism is true because Biden is repeating. He's repeating the Wilson administration, at least the last months of it.
But Mike, while we're celebrating nationally, winning the House, the Senate, and the presidency, something good happened in California too. Proposition
amazing.
36
And I was
passed.
going to get there. My favorite part of the night, well, maybe 1A, was that Gavin Newsom was probably extremely angry at about 8:10, which we'll get to when election results are released in a second. And that's because Gavin Newsom, this is why there's hope for California, was 100% against keeping criminals off the streets and selling drugs in general that kill people, and was against Prop 36, which was put together by a cross coalition of people that made sense. And Kurt, do you know what Prop 36, which reverses much of the deadly Prop 47, passed by?
70-30, didn't it?
It was 70-30, 70.4 to 29.6 so far.
But Mike, that means that 30% of the voters voted to stop crime by voting for Proposition 36, but still voted for Kamala Harris, who was one of the biggest supporters of Proposition 47.
70%. 70%. But again, it just goes to show you why I talked about Trump. And Scott asked me about my point here. I had told the Chronicle a week ago when they called me and said, "Don't you think there's going to be riots in the streets? And aren't people worried about January 6th?" And I'm like, people are worried about what happens Tuesday. They're not really worried about stuff that they haven't been involved in. Try not to use the swear word here. People said, "Oh, I'll vote for Kamala because I'm a good Democrat and I'm not going to vote for that Trump guy because, but I sure as heck don't want my head blown off and have to page a clerk to get a can of deodorant because it's locked up and watch smash and grabs close down my malls and my cousins or my daughter die," because everybody's against death, from drug overdoses. And I think that's where the crossover comes
not
in.
against death.
Right. Most people are against death. So that was a big sign for California because of branding and marketing, in my not so humble opinion, because we on the conservative side have beat up for a long time, and many of the middle of the road Democrats, as you call it, agree with us that 47 is a really bad idea. And that's just one victory we had last night. In addition to other offices that we'll talk about, what's another victory we had last night, guys?
Rent control lost.
It did.
We also, practically every initiative, every proposition that Gavin Newsom was supporting died. The voters, there's exceptions. Prop 2 was general education bonds, right? That's one of those things where your schools suck. You're spending more money than any other state per student by a lot, and you still have crappy education. And so we need more money, but they can't say we need more money for DEI or to make sure that your kid can get his nards chopped off. Instead, they sit there and go, oh, the roof's leaking. You don't want the rain coming in on poor Johnny. So they put an infrastructure public education bond together. That passed by 56%. And then Prop 3, which is the right to marry. So now they've got, hey, we can marry anything. We can marry 3 women and 2 guys. We can have 5 people in a polyamorous relationship.
Two
Yeah.
dogs
Marry
and
my
a
water
horse.
And then Prop 4 passed, issue natural resources bond. That one passed also with 58% of the vote. Now, the good news is Prop 5, they were going to lower the threshold to fund housing projects for the homeless.
Hold it right there. Stop the presses and let me chime in. That is one of the biggest no's that was on the ballot. And you guys know, right? Prop 5, for everyone out there, when you talk about branding, and I want to hand it to Susan Shelley and Howard Jarvis, who advertised a blank against Prop 5. Prop 5, and I was preaching this in front of group, really would have gutted another famous proposition, which is what?
Proposition 13, 1978.
Prop
Box of
13.
Snickers to you. And that's what they tried to pull over on the public. And the public, at least, was smart enough to see that because the branding 13 is good and 5 was going to be bad, stuck with it. So that losing or on the way, it's what, how, Scott, you're obviously looking at a screen or you're
Yeah.
gazing off into the distance like Biden. I'm not sure which. I'm gonna go with the former.
No, it's 56. They lost by 56-43.
Right.
So,
So-
yeah, that's great. Here they are. They voted for these other 2 bonds, and then they stopped at Prop 5 and said, we're not going to do that. We want to stay in control. Prop 6, this one was about, they're calling it slavery, when we have prisoners that work in prison and they earn money. They can earn money to be able to, buy cigarettes at the prison store or whatever, but they can also do it to pay off victims and pay off restitution and learn a skill. And some idiot thought it'd be a great idea. Oh, no, that's not fair. You can't have them work like that. And so what are they going to do? Sit around and just lift weights all day long? It's ridiculous. And that failed also 55-45. And then here we are. We had a minimum wage increase for, you have
Hold on,
something.
Scott. I want to say something. I was just a little bit alarmed, and I know you pretty well, about how much you know about prison life. But anyway, back to you on the rest of it. Scott's
Yeah.
like, and then, there's a solitary confinement,
just-
and then the guards get off at 10, and they
Let's-
carry these little
let's
blue
just say that-
thermoses.
I've gotten into the habit of not picking up the soap when I drop it. So, Prop
Kick field
6,
goal with it.
that was the slavery part. Prop 32. Now, I don't know why they jumped from 6 to all of a sudden 32, but we had a minimum wage increase on fast food to $20 an hour. And in fact, there's new information out we can go over later where now they've got a study that shows they've lost jobs, like we said. The prices have gone up, like we said. They've reduced hours, like we've said. And all the things that they said to get the thing passed in the first, or when they passed in the first place, false, didn't count. Here they are, they put another initiative on, Prop 32, to raise the minimum wage for everybody, not just fast food, to $18 an hour instead of 20. And it failed, 52-48. People are starting to recognize this is a problem.
And I'm going to throw this back to Kurt for a second, because Kurt, you know my favorite word I can't say on the air, but what's your favorite word?
Trump,
When
Trump,
it
Trump.
comes to spending bond money, no.
Capitalism.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Capitalism won on that
Oh,
one. Leave it up to the market to decide what to pay. And if I can't get a worker a profit, it's up to me to pay more. Do not leave it in the hands of the government, because as Peanut the squirrel would attest to, oh, he's dead. When you leave things in the hands of the government, it doesn't end well. Keep going, Scott.
But Mike,
Go ahead, Kurt.
I want to jump in on that minimum wage thing for a minute. Have you seen, because I know our viewers and listeners have seen how much more expensive it is to go to fast food in California?
you mean
The
for
Well,
those
day
that are
they can
still
do
in
it.
business?
The day after they raised that minimum wage for fast food workers, double combo at In-N-Out went from 8.40 to 10.50. Whammo, one day.
And
That's
they will tell you that it only
because
went up 10%, but that, that's not really true.
Well,
And
Scott, that'd be about 25%, but who's counting?
yeah, I mean, if you look at the cost of, let's say, a double from the time that Biden entered office until today, after the fast food industry gets a $20 an hour bump, it's doubled. The double has doubled, but that's
can I
inflation as well as the minimum wage.
Kurt, do me a favor, since you researched the Amish. I know you're on a computer. Let me ask you another trivia question. I want to say the federal minimum wage. I want everybody to think about this real quick. What California has done to itself with its government. Kurt, what's the federal minimum wage? I want to say 7.18. I could be wrong. I'm just pulling out of my head.
$7.25 an hour.
No,
I
California
did.
is not out of touch at all. $20 an hour, hey, it's right in there.
Right. That they're saying, right, exactly. That literally California is 3 times more expensive to live, but it's not our fault. So why don't we make it more expensive to live so we can raise the minimum wage more? Now,
It's
I get it
interesting.
if it might be twice expensive to live. I got sunshine, I got this, that, and the other. But they're saying just based on the minimum wage, it's 3 times more expensive to live. It
Well,
seems
what
insane.
Democrats are saying, guys, is if you want this background behind me, you got to pay for it in higher
Okay,
wages,
so
higher
that's
costs.
all good. Let's go on so that
All
we can
right.
get through these things. Okay. So, but kudos to the voters for recognizing that and voting against that. I mean, because most people are kind of like, yeah, give me more money. I'll take it. Because when they raise the minimum wage, all the wages go up as well, right? They're all ratcheted up off that minimum wage. And they voted no. So I have to respect that. Okay. Prop 33. Prop 33 was to expand rent control. So basically, what that would have done, it would have allowed Santa Monica or any of these other cities to put new rent control ordinances on property. And thankfully, I mean, this was defeated 61, almost 62% to 38%. That's huge. So people recognize that when you put government controls, price controls on things, you get less of it. And you get less of it. I thought the purpose of getting housing was to have more housing. And they put all these requirements on cities to get more housing. And then they're going to allow rent control, which means you get less, and especially, or at least less rental housing. What do you think, Mike?
I think it also would have killed, and this isn't talked about a lot. What it really is the state's way. And this is kind of, and again, kudos to the people of California. The Republican Party, and we'll kind of jump into that after the propositions, has a branding problem. We have better ideas, but people
Wait a
think,
minute.
oh,
Republican Party has a branding
a
problem? Don't you think
branding.
that's like a story all by itself or
It
a
is.
show
And
all
that's
by
why I'm
itself?
jumping quickly through it. Because the reality is the rent control proposition was exactly, and I want to go down a slight rabbit hole here because we've talked about this before, is the
As long as
problem
it's
that
a
this,
shallow rabbit hole.
it's a shallow rabbit hole. I'm a small guy. The, that didn't come out right. That I don't want to go like Trump, not like Donald Palmer, but somewhere in between. So, state government believes they know more about how people should live locally. So they've spent the last few years saying, hey, you have to build this, you have to build that. They're suing the city of Norwalk, who says, we don't want liquor stores anymore for the next couple years, 10 years, and we don't want a homeless shelter, which is going to house 80 people. So the government is suing the government because the state wants to be bigger. This rent control thing actually would have, although it says it's going to allow local government to do things, would have also killed all the current. If a city county wants to put in their own local rent control, although LA's turned it down 4 times, the left keeps trying at it, they're allowed to let the people vote on it. If you don't like it, move to another city. This would have killed that.
And then in case, like I said, in case anybody doesn't know, but I'm glad that the voters recognize it. When the government taxes or tries to control how much you can get, you get less of it. Because who wants to go out and take the risk and build an apartment building if they're not going to be able to rent it for enough money to pay for their costs? It's not going to happen, which means you get less housing. All right, next item. Prop 34, restrict spending by healthcare providers in general. This was 5148. Again, I look at it as they're taking and trying to restrict somebody and telling them how much they can spend for something. Kurt, you had more info on this one. What did you think?
You know about Prop 34? Yeah,
Prop 34.
The problem is you were getting government money to a nonprofit that was spending money to put rent control.
Right.
On
We
the ballot.
recommended a yes on that
So
one.
it was really a money laundering scheme by these nonprofits.
Correct. The background, I'm sorry to interrupt, Kurt. Well, I'm not. I'm trying to be polite. Is that 34?
Good thing for you.
Yes, I'm working on it. I'm in politeness rehab. 34. The reason it was yes is because the reason rent control, in case you're wondering, kind of like why, and by the way, something which wasn't on the ballot this time, thank you, Jesus, thank you, Lord, was dialysis control, because the left unions keep throwing it up there. I think this is the first major election we've had in about 4 cycles with no dialysis. And we've certainly had rent control on there a number of times because the same AIDS Foundation throws it up, and money that we're giving to the AIDS Foundation, which has now reached 100 million, is being funneled not to help sick people. That's what 34 was about. It's being funneled to his pet political projects as a leftist. That's why yes on 34 was kind of important, and I'm glad the public saw that.
And it passed, which is great. And then Prop 35, permanently fund Medi-Cal health in general. And it also passed by a lot, 66%, almost 67%.
Yeah, and that probably should have been a no, but in the big picture, I'll live with it.
Which it just took, as I recall, a tax that the legislature had instituted to be able to pay for Medi-Cal, and it permanently funds it. It's like taking the cigarette tax and permanently assigning it so that the legislators don't use it for something else. But again, that's something you should be able to talk to your legislature about. And then, of course, we've already talked about Prop 36, the big one where we reversed the pro-criminal Prop 47, which, to remind people, Kamala Harris was the one who was Attorney General on Prop 47. She lied on the title in summary and said it's going to improve everybody's life. There'll be less crime. And instead, we got more crime. But truth in advertising is not something Kamala Harris is very good at. I'm not sure there's anything that Kamala Harris is very good at.
You'll have to, I think, would be hard pressed to find. She's certainly not good at winning elections.
It's a small list, right?
Yeah, it's a very well. I'll leave it alone because the list she allegedly was good at a few years ago, we really shouldn't talk about because we're trying to keep it a family show. I'll leave it at that. So it's interesting in California for everybody out there as we kind of make the tide back that we saw some inroads in California. We may even pick up a couple state assembly seats. Again, our counting process is really, really long. And I'm looking at a lot of seats right now. Looks like we're going to hold most of the congressional seats. But I do want to talk about Kiley is a win slam dunk. Schiff did beat Garvey. That's not a surprise, but there's more to that story coming in the next few months because Schiff may end up,
Behind
um,
bars.
well,
Mike,
that's,
Or
let's
you
talk to
like
the
my
audience.
mind. That's very good. I'm glad you got that.
Let's
What?
talk to the audience about what Schiff did. He has a mortgage on a property near DC and one in California, and he lied on his mortgage applications, declaring both of them were his primary residence.
Correct. And why Schiff was up there last night yapping away. And I want to go down to for a second before we get there to tell you how bad the press is. And the Republican Party, and I'm going to say this now because the election over, is better than the press. And when I say the Republican Party, it's not the Republicans, like it's not the Democrats. It's a small group of people, some you know and some you don't, and I'll leave it at that, who put Steve Garvey up for office. God bless him. He shouldn't have been running against Schiff. He's not got political experience. He's got branding like Trump because he had a baseball for a long time. But Schiff lied on a mortgage application 3 times, saying it was his principal residence was in Maryland. That's a crime, one, for lying on your mortgage application, and we have the proof. Schiff
that's
should have
called
been,
fraud.
yes, called fraud. Thank you, Scott, for clarifying that with the official word. Fraud.
Fraud. Yes.
Fraud.
The official
He's a
word of the
fraud.
day is fraud.
Well, and don't you have to live? I guess in Congress you don't have to live in your district.
No, but
No,
you
but
do
you
have to
have
live
to
in the
live
state.
in the state.
And so, yeah, either that's why, of course, well, the bottom line is
So he declared himself ineligible to be in the House or Senate.
right. So he did it this way. He has a house in California. That's his primary domicile that he uses to declare his residency. And he goes and declares Maryland's address as a primary residence. Also, that he could save what, 1 point on his mortgage, so he pays 5% instead of 6 or
Don't
whatever.
get the homeowner's exemption too. That's about $100 a year. Hey, you got to cut back where you
So-
can, dude.
So,
Look at
so in order
Mike's
to save,
policies.
in order to save, call it $1,000 a month, $12,000, he perjures himself and commits fraud to save that money when it's obvious that it's not, because he can't actually declare Maryland as his primary residence, because then he wouldn't be a resident of California and he'd be disqualified from being a congressman or a senator. So what's going to happen? Oh, wait a minute. We actually can reform the DOJ under Trump, and he might actually get prosecuted fairly. What a novel concept.
Now, Schiff's worst nightmare is probably the election because the DOJ probably wouldn't take action unless, let's just say Congress started an investigation. Now, can you guys refresh my memory a bit? Who was driving for investigations of Trump last time he was in office? Because no one is above the law. Where did I hear that?
Adam Schiff.
Oh, yeah. No one is above the law, except apparently for Adam Schiff.
Or Democrats in general.
Well, in general, but this is really, I think, Schiff should be a little bit nervous. But I want to also stress someone who should be a little bit ashamed, and it's not shocking, and it's the LA Times. And Kurt, before we went on the air, I started to talk about this, and I'm going to tell you something kind of weird. I put a post up about it last night that happened. So, California, because we're the last major state, our polls close at 8, and we're relatively slow to react. We normally have what's called an 801 burst, meaning the polls close at 8 and the first round of voting comes in about 8:01. And then the press has a really bad habit.
You mean the results, right? The results. The first results, usually
Right.
by counting the absentees, they get announced at 8:01. Okay.
8:01 because they're allowed to start counting them 10 days prior, whatever, it's 20 days prior, okay? So they have a secret little vault and they know a count and they release that absentee. Well, now nobody knows obviously what that count is, including the press. Fair enough?
They shouldn't. It's supposed to be secret.
Right. Well, and they probably didn't. I'll give them that. So last night, as I'm watching my news feed, the press declares California in general, Trump's won. All right, I get it. Trump's going to win California. Give it to Harris, the electoral votes. But the LA Times, and this is kind of a riot, and I took some screenshots of it. I'll probably put them out tomorrow. LA Times at 8:01. And by the way, I'm on the Secretary of State website, and don't let the Associate Press, anybody fool you. There's no secret source. It all comes CAGOP, Democratic Party, from the Secretary of State website. We all have equal access. LA Times, a story shows up at 8:02. Adam Schiff wins by a landslide over Steve Garvey. However, the
No
Secretary of State website says no results shall be released till 8:10. Wait, there's more, as they say on late night TV. LA Times says, by the way, the story was written, it says right there in the byline, at 5 o'clock that night, 3 hours before the polls closed, okay? And I get it, you can write the story ahead of time. And then they have, and you could see by the results and the links in the articles went to the Secretary of State website that still showed 0 votes. Now, I know you can call an election a little bit early, but when nothing's been reported yet, give old guy Garvey a break and at least give him the other 10 minutes. That's an example of changing the news before it's written.
Well, yeah, if they risk obviously the chance that Garvey would actually win, and then or create a nice photo op for Garvey to hold that article up in the newspaper. Hey, look, it says Adam Schifferbrains won, but I won. But yeah, it wasn't a really daring prediction, obviously.
But still, it's funny because a guy said
Even that blind squirrel can find a nut every so often, right?
So listen, there was an Orlando Sentinel or something had some headlines printed up. Harris wins the presidency, and somebody had sent that to me offline a few days ago. They had them prepared, you know what I mean, because it's Orlando's Central printed paper. And my reply to them back to answer you, Scott, and I put that out in the Twitter feed today, was what's the most famous headline ever of oops? Dewey beats Truman.
Right.
Remember that?
Yeah.
So
well, you were there. I wasn't.
I was there. I remember that, right? In fact, I was delivering papers that morning, selling them for a nickel a piece on the street corner. So my point is, in today's electronic world, I get they had it loaded in the queue. I get they let the computers did it, but it's still LA Times after you just lost a lot of subscribers and a lot more credibility, which there's a lot of jokes there as to how much credibility can you lose when your credibility is, it's kind of like Bernie Madoff or what Harvey Weinstein, they charge you with
Or a
more
more
crimes.
modern one would be Sam Bankman-Fried.
There you go. Right. They're charging him with more crimes. We found more fraud. It's like, really? Okay, now you're just piling on. So I don't want to pile too hard on the LA Times because they're the best to make fun of. So please stay in business. But that's a ridiculous thing to publish something ahead of time. Scott, Kurt, I'm going to use this metaphor with you. I used it with Scott already in a conversation today. Padres played the White Sox near the end of the season. White Sox lost a record 112 games. You could pretty much,
121.
121, excuse me, 112, I think, by the time they came into San Diego, set a major league record. You knew the Padres were probably going to win, but at least you waited till the end of the game to write the story. Fair enough?
Yeah, but the Padre pitcher almost had a no-hitter against him.
Hey, they may have written the story in the 6th inning, but at least they waited to the end of the game to publish it.
Right. I mean, give me a friggin' break here.
Yeah,
I
but
mean, the press
the
is
last
that
good reporter
prejudiced.
of the LA Times was the sports writer Jim Murray, and he's been dead a long time.
He has.
Wait a minute, wait a minute. LA Times has writers?
Well, in the 70s.
Oh, I thought they just had like teleprompter readers or Wikipedia readers or something.
No, Jim
They
Murray was very good.
they have a very poor excuse for a newspaper. They really ought to change the name. It's
Oh, I
propaganda.
stopped subscribing to the Times a long time ago.
The propaganda paper.
I didn't want to give them
Pravda, LA Pravda Times. Okay, do we want to talk about where we're at? I know that the Republicans are up in the House. They're guesstimating.
I was going to talk about some of the races. We need to hold our seats and we might pick up a cup. So Young Kim slaughtering Joe Kerr.
But
Ken
that's a
Calvert.
hold. That's a hold. In other
Right,
words,
that's a hold.
she's there now.
Ken Calvert, which was behind Will Rollins. Okay, and I've got it again. Restaurant quality. I don't know that I'd run with Calvert, but he has turned it around to now be ahead of Rollins, 51.4 to Rollins 48.6 or 120. There's a gap there of about 67-42 votes specifically. Now there's a lot more votes to print, as the Democrats would say. We say count on the Republican side, but let's be aware that's still going on. Michelle
Right.
Steele was down to
Again,
Derek Tran.
That's a hold.
Because
That's a
Calvert
hold.
is the incumbent.
Michelle Steele is
She's up by like
a
4
hold, but she's now pulled ahead of Derek Tran.
And again, that's a hold because she's the current incumbent. But we have a pickup in 47 with Scott Baugh.
Yes, we
That
do.
was Katie Porter's seat, and Katie Porter ran for Senate and therefore wasn't running for Congress. Thank you, Lord.
And I want to
Yeah.
remind you, Katie Porter was the liberal UC Irvine professor that poured boiling, scalding water on the head of her live-in boyfriend. So she's a real winner.
Husband abuse, spousal abuse. So that seat was an open seat, and Scott Baugh, the Republican, who ran against Katie Porter, barely losing 2 years ago, ran and is ahead. He's ahead, not by a whole lot, just by a couple percentage points, but he's still ahead. And that's a pickup. Mark Levin, is he going to win? Or is the Republican going to win?
Anderson.
Matt Gunderson.
That's relatively close. I think, is that a pickup or a win?
That'd be a
Well,
pickup.
Mike Levin is the current incumbent. He's the Democrat.
Right.
So
So right now, I
it would be a
believe
pickup.
it's
It
a
would be
pickup.
But right now he's Gunderson's behind by like 1.5 points. But again, we've got like 60 some odd thousand votes. Actually, for the congressional thing, you probably have more like 90,000 votes left to count because California is stupid in their vote counting.
What's also stupid is that's not listed in this. See, and by the way, I do want to give kudos to the CAGOP, to Cole Patterson, because their data was a lot better this time, amazingly well, actually, this time. But you know what? I don't think Gunderson Levin is on the target list, is it?
No, he's a bonus. I think they were looking at him as not being one, and I don't think the NCC or Triple C contributed a dime to his race. But the local Orange County Republican Party and the San Diego Republican Party busted their butt to get out there and help him. And you had overlays
I'm looking
of a
at
couple of assembly seats, and they helped.
target tables to say what every race is important. We talked about this earlier. Another one, go ahead, because there's another race I want you to get to that no one in the country is talking about.
So which one? I can go back to the beginning. I'm looking at
We talked about it today. Jim Costa and Michael Mayer.
Jim Costa. Jim Costa is the Democrat. He's up by like 0.75%, very much within striking distance. He was not considered to be a target at all. This would be another freebie for the Republican Party, and another gain that would be a big gain. David Valadao is a Republican. It looks like he's going to hold on, but for some reason they're still calling it as too close to call.
Right, but I want to dwell on your point here for a second, that The Valadeos are talked a lot, the Michelle Steele, the young Kim, which everybody talked about till she slaughtered it. But the California GOP, I'm going to say this right now, why we need a change. There are so many, and because of that, by the way, this is why they don't get coverage even from the conservative press, because the GOP tries to determine the agenda like they did in your race, Scott. I'm going to go ahead and say it because they didn't consider your race to be important. The Queen had spoken, right? And it wasn't considered to be an important race. So why should they bother to give you any help? Yet some of these races, which will determine the fate of the country, like the Costa Mejia race, is right there because he did it himself pretty much. Back to you, Scott.
Same thing. I agree. And then we got a couple other races. Mike Garcia, he's up in the, I think the Ventura area. He's up by 2 points, but it looks like he's going to hold on. That would just be a hold because he's the incumbent and he's the Republican. Everything else, I think, is kind of a wash. So we have an opportunity to pick up one in Boss seat, and we have 2 or maybe 3 seats additional that are maybes that we can pick up in California. Otherwise, we're holding.
So what this means, everybody out there, is indeed at the end of the night, and California is the slowest, and for all you conspiracy theorists out there, California, we can't tell if they're up to something. The system's too complicated. If a ballot is postmarked, by the way, this is something else I don't understand. Here, I'll go down a hole here before we end the show here. If a ballot is postmarked by election day, they have up to 7 days to receive it and count the ballot. Now I'm going to repeat that again very slowly. If a ballot is postmarked on election day, not received by election day, they have 7 days to receive it. Now, why am I emphasizing that point? Even the post office, not the picture of efficiency, but by their own edict, if you will, at the most takes 5 days to deliver mail.
You're going to give the the Democrats up in Sacramento an excuse to extend that 7 days to 10 or 14 days.
No, I mean, they have, the post office says, we'll deliver it in 5. The Democrats say, well, we'll take it if it's delivered in 7. That needs to change, and we can get that changed by the people here. But the road to this, the road finally at the end of the night to control of Congress is indeed resting on some of these races in California. And we're going to take back a couple state assembly seats. We may have a pickup in the state Senate seats. And this is why we do Behind Enemy Lines at California Free Radio. Because, gentlemen, as we wrap up here a little bit, California, indeed, for everybody listening, and I do get things from around the country, indeed, we're a little bit different. But we're pretty much, Gavin Newsom's an exception, being of the same species. I'm not quite sure about Gavin, but we're all the same species throughout the United States and the same country. And the people do tend to think more logically. And we have to save California because we've stopped it for right now. But generally, there's a lot of glimmers of light here, aren't there, this election for California? Scott and Kurt, as we wrap up.
What do you think, Kurt?
We need to register more voters and we need to get out the vote. But yes, there's an opportunity, but there needs to be a greater effort and modern technology needs to be applied.
Yeah, it's obvious. We sat there and picked up maybe 1, maybe 2 assembly seats, maybe a Senate seat, and that's the time when Trump was literally having a landslide across the country. And it translated just a little bit into California. And I really think it translated more, but our party is so disorganized and using their money so incorrectly that we didn't take advantage of it like we could have. We had 3 or 4 other assembly races that if you put a little bit of money into them, we could have picked those up, but they didn't do it. And what we've got is a lack of leadership at the state level, and sometimes the counties can make up for that, but it's hard to do that. And practically every county in the state has no leadership. Orange County is one of the exceptions, but they didn't do a great job either. So, here we are, we have an opportunity to do it. And because of lack of leadership, not lack of resources, but lack of quality leadership and decision making, we failed to take advantage of.
Scott, before we go, I want to mention some interesting races around the country really fast. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, and Lauren Boebert all won their congressional seats again. And they were hard.
Actually, Boebert switched seats and still won.
Yeah, she's now in Northeast Colorado. The liberal progressive prosecutor in the Georgia County where nursing student Laken Riley was murdered lost by a landslide to her Republican challenger.
Sweet.
Which is good. And then I want to rag on California one more time. Nick Bosa, the star of the San Francisco 49ers, put a MAGA hat on, and the NFL wants to fine him. Really?
And
Also,
he said it's worth it
I don't know if
today.
you saw.
I was just saying they had television cuts of that when he came in there and did it, and they fuzzed out the logo on the hat, so you couldn't even see it on TV.
And Kurt, you know what? Thank you for bringing up.
Wait a
that.
second. One more question. The DA in LA, you're going to say anything about that?
Oh,
I
yes.
was just rolling to that. Gascon, but wait, there's more. Gascon lost to Hockman. Okay, so Gascon, who's become nationally famous for being a corrupt moron. But wait, there's more. Pamela Price got recalled, and the district attorney in Alameda and the mayor of Oakland, who's more corrupt than Bernie Madoff, also got recalled too. Of course, nothing showed. When you say civic pride, you think of Oakland. Maybe not. That city's not exactly well run, and she got recalled. We'll talk about that.
Couldn't part of the reason for the recall mean they lost the Warriors, the Oakland A's, and the Oakland Raiders teams?
No, part of the reason for the recall is that her house got raided by the FBI. The city's $100 million in debt. She's probably going to go to jail. And her salute to the public was basically, hey, here's the New York middle finger. And I'm more
they
righteous
lost
than
their
you are."
In-N-Out.
Oh, yeah, that would throw people over
Is
there.
that why they raided her house? They're looking for that $100 million?
There's a whole other, we ought to do a whole other show. In fact, we're going to do a whole other show on recalls and direct democracy. Look.
What about the mayor of San
You
Francisco?
made a really important point about Gascon in LA County. He was a George Soros-backed DA.
Right,
I
and
think
so
the
was
tide
Pamela
is
Price.
the tide is turning in America against those kooks.
Yeah, because they're not doing their job.
I'm not sure, but I have San Francisco. Did London Breed we win or not?
No, right now there's London is behind Daniel Lurie, the billionaire heir from Levi's jeans.
Okay.
Now, not by much, but it's too close to call, so they say. But he's ahead. The Levi guy, the new guy, is ahead, and the incumbent London is behind.
So next time you go to London, don't buy jeans. Anyway, there's a pun there somewhere. Listen, we're going to cover more of this next week. We're going to be expanding our show a lot. Everyone out there, the Republican Party may not spend its money wisely, but spend your time with your ears and eyes wisely. Follow me at Netter Mike. You may be watching this right now on X. Go to Rebuild California, where you're going to find this on Facebook. If you happen to have a job, and if you're the leftist and didn't vote Trump, I suggest you get one. There'll be a lot more employment opportunities. Go to Mike Netter on LinkedIn. Follow Scott at taxfighter.com because that cause continues. And if you happen to be in a grocery store and see Kurt, follow him, would you, and make sure he's not shoplifting.
No, I'm not a Democrat.
I know, Kurt. I just should keep your eye on Kurt anyway at this
But
point.
follow him anyway, yeah.
Yes, follow him anyway. This is probably just, if you see Kurt, follow him. It's a really good idea. He's not active on social media, but he's out and about a lot, and I'll leave it at that.
Hey,
Everyone out there, go ahead.
I say we're behind the California curtain here and we're trying to bring freedom back to this state. And so we're shouting out all the things that are happening in this state. We need your help, your support.
That's right. It's not the Iron Curtain, because let's face it, Gavin Newsom ought to have tinfoil on his head. So let's go with the fact we've got a tinfoil drape that we're trying to burst through. California is still part of America. It's still your state, and we've had big inroads, and we are not going to stop pushing until we take back every corner of this great state of California. Thank you, everyone who voted, who participated. We'll be back next week. We're expanding this edition. In the meantime, God bless, good night, take a deep breath, and keep on fighting for California.